So Andrew Berry drafted a lot of skill guys, a couple of running backs, tight end, a couple of quarterbacks. What do you think of the infusion of talent from this year's draft class?
So, normally you'd want to see that at the receiver position as far as positional value goes, but that's not necessarily the point here. The 1-2 punch of Quinshaw Judkins and Dylan Sampson could be really, really good. I thought Judkins is one of the better goal line runners, in and around the end zone. I thought he did a really nice job at Ohio State finding the end zone, catches the ball well out of the backfield. Dylan Sampson just really difficult to tackle. Big play threat for Tennessee. Another guy that had a nose for the end zone. I thought he did a really nice job in that Tennessee scheme. Harold Fannin was one of my favorite players in the draft. Tricky to pin as like a smaller tight end without great blocking skills, but that's a pretty common skill set coming out. But he was a special receiver, one of the best receiving seasons, if not the best of all time in college for a tight end last year. And I love that he did it against big schools. When he faced Penn State, when he's playing SEC schools, didn't matter. Fannin always showed up. So I think he's a weapon. He's a guy that you can move around in your traditional move tight end type of roles or in the slot. So I think Fannin brings a really nice weapon to the table. And then, of course, the quarterback situation, of all the quarterbacks in this draft, I didn't love a ton in the first round. I really liked Cam Ward. I thought Shedeur would go in the first. But then I thought Dylan Gabriel was one of my favorite day 2 or 3 guys, depending on when he was going to go. As far as developmental quarterbacks go, I think Dylan Gabriel, if he was a couple inches taller, ends up going much higher. Productive at 3 different schools. I think he's accurate down the field. I think he has a good arm, despite his size. A lot of people say that he doesn't have a good arm because he's short, but he does. He zips it pretty well and gets the ball down the field. He throws the ball well on the run. Pretty athletic. Saw some big plays with his legs. So I like Dylan Gabriel, and of course we all know about Shedeur. And I think if he's given the opportunity, he has a chance to really run the offense, throw the ball accurately. Would need to see him do a little bit more throwing into tight windows, handling pressure better. But you've got a couple quarterbacks. Hopefully, the goal is to find one, and I like the idea of taking multiple shots, even though it was unorthodox way of doing it, but taking multiple shots to try to find that one quarterback that's the long-term answer.
How do you balance? You got a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Those guys usually don't factor into starting quarterback competitions, if you will. How do you balance, the veterans and the rookies? I mean, I know you got to find out about the rookies, but you also have to sell that you're trying to win to guys like the guys that are on that offensive line who are in their 30s and don't have many years left.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because normally when you're drafting a younger quarterback, it's with a first or second year general manager, and it's easy, right? You just say, hey, whatever's best for the young quarterback, you have to do well by them, like Caleb Williams with the Bears. That his development's the most important thing for Chicago. But it's usually with the younger GM, and I think with Barry and where he is, I think that should still be the goal, which is we have to find a guy for 2026, and we actually have to find out sooner rather than later if Shedeur Sanders can play or if Dylan Gabriel can play, because next year we might be set up to pick in the top 10 again, and there'll be multiple quarterback options again, and we might have to go back to that well. So I think it is tricky, maybe selling the veterans, but I think the Browns declared they're in a transition time. It's a rebuild, which doesn't mean tear it all down and build it back up again. It just means you might have to sacrifice wins in year 1 to find out what the long-term answer is. Because if you can't solve the quarterback position, it doesn't matter what the rest of the roster is. And so I think they have to do everything they can to get reps for Dylan Gabriel, for Shedeur Sanders, maybe to the detriment of Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, right? It's just make sure that the young guys get out there, see what you have in them, and know if you have to draft a first-round quarterback next year, because you have to get that solved, and you have to get as many answers as possible, I think, this year from those rookies.